without further ado, I'm going to close this off. Like I said, feel free if you haven't got a chance to fill out the Mentimeter. I'm still going to leave that up, but feel free to put your information in there if you still need to do so. So next, I'm going to pass it on over to the Program Manager for Water-Based Systems Unit for TDEC's Division of Water Resources, Voin Yannick. Did I say that right? Did I say your last name right?
Almost.
I wanted 100%. But so I'll pass it on over to you, Voin. And do you have a preference on if you'd rather me click through your slides, or would you rather do that? Completely happy to.
I can click my way through it. So, yep, it's working. Well, I'm going to go back on the previous slide and just give everyone a very quick overview of what we're talking about here in the case that you're not familiar with the multi-sector permit. Again, my name is Voin Yannick. I'm with the Division of Water Resources. I'm the manager of the group that is in charge of NPDES permits, individual and general permits. What's the difference between the two? Individual permits are like custom-made suits. They are issued for a particular facility and set of circumstances, receiving stream conditions and designated uses, while general permits are issued on a statewide basis, and they are issued for a particular type of activity that is similar either through its SIC code or the nature of pollutants. We have a number of general permits, and one of those general permits, which allows for much faster processing of notices of intent in general permits. Notice of application is called notice of intent, is basically a registration to get a coverage under a general permit. General permit has one number that is TNR05 and then a bunch of zeros. So when we speak to our customers and when you have a number that you're referring to, remember that is not your permit number, that is your tracking number. You're one of many that has coverage under a general permit. A premise of general permits is that the customers, applicants, have familiarized themselves with a general permit terms and conditions, and when they submit a notice of intent, they are saying, I'm familiar with what this general permit says, and I'm going to be able to be in compliance. So moving on with respect to reporting requirements in the permit, as you probably have seen in the previous versions of the permit, that first time was issued in 1995, is that industrial stormwater runoff may have some pollutants that are being carried away from industrial sites. Not every industrial site has to obtain coverage under this permit. EPA decided that it was a subset of manufacturing facilities as well as construction sites. There's a total of 11 categories and a bunch of SIC codes where facilities need to submit a notice of intent to obtain coverage. Not every sector has to sample their stormwater runoff. In some sectors, just visual observations and good best management practices implemented at the site are sufficient. But at some facilities, we have asked them to sample. And so over the years, we have collected a ton of samples, and I'm going to talk about what have we seen so far and what are the decisions that we'll be making when we prepare a replacement permit. Remember, general permits are not reissued. They are replacing each other. The next generation permit is going to be based on the previous one as well as EPA's permit. EPA's multi-sector permit has been also driven by some lawsuits, and some decisions that were forced into that permit are a little different than what we've seen in the multi-sector permit. So what have we seen so far with respect to data points? We have seen and received over 160,000 results from a variety of pollutants that are measured their concentrations in industrial stormwater runoff. And I don't mean to dazzle you by the numbers, but these are going to be relevant and used with respect to making a decision of what will be required to be sampled in the next permit. It is my opinion that we need to find a balance between sampling that will show us and indicate whether or not there are pollutants that may compromise water quality in surface waters in Tennessee, versus just doing sampling for the benefit of sampling as if we are checking the stormwater runoff on a routine basis, but that may cost our customers, industrial facilities, a pretty penny. Not necessarily in lab costs, but the logistics of collecting industrial stormwater samples and doing that in a qualifying storm event are complicated and expensive. So you can see here, I want to point out a couple of or maybe 3 different parameters that I'm going to talk about later, and that is the highest one, magnesium, that has a extremely high exceedance rate of 66%, which may, at a glance, and if you don't know much about industrial stormwater runoff and soil constituents, may seem like a reason to be alarmed, as well as aluminum and total iron. All 3 of those, and I will explain later, will be considered to be eliminated in the upcoming permit because of their omnipresence. They're everywhere, and if you have any total suspended solids in your sample, you're probably going to exceed that threshold level. The reporting in the permit currently is set up to be done 30 days after the sample has been taken and analyzed. Historically, we used to ask our customers to submit that by end of March the following calendar year. The sampling is done on a calendar year basis, but we would then be absolutely inundated. There's no sense of people waiting until the March of next year to submit samples. Exceedance rates presented graphically, same data, only illustrated as a graph. Now, let's look at the SIC codes. As I said, industrial stormwater federal rules are driven by SIC codes. So let's take a look at who is most likely to exceed cutoff concentrations. Now, a quick tangent here. Cutoff concentrations or benchmark values are not limits. There are certain categories that have limits. I'm not going to get lost in those details. Vast majority of our customers have only benchmarks. What does that mean? It is a red flag concentration that is indicating whether or not the concentration of a pollutant of concern or parameter is going to be above a certain value that indicates that additional attention should be given to that particular pollutant. So if you, for example, have high level of cadmium and you're in the primary metal products, you need to look around the facility. Exceeding the benchmark concentration per se is not a violation. Ignoring that fact is a violation. You have to look around the facility, try to find sources of that pollutant and eliminate them if at all possible. So this is by unique SIC code, number of exceedances and exceedance rates in facilities. Of course, this table is much longer, but for the sake of not overwhelming anyone with too many numbers and too small of a font, I have just included first 15 or 20. Moving next to, this is the same information that is presented in a graphical format. Let's look at the sector. So how is this permit organized? This permit is organized by industrial categories. Well, I said that it's driven by SIC codes. A number of SIC codes, typically first 2 or first 3 digits out of total of 4 in SIC codes, are defining what type of industry people are manufacturing in. And those are clustered in permit sectors. That's why it's called multi-sector permit. And each of those sectors has a letter that corresponds to it. And so this is now exceedance rates that are correlated to sectors. So still we're looking at metals and scrap recycling that are going to be in the top tier of exceedance rates. That means we're seeing the most pollutant loading from those facilities. Here's the graphical representation of the same data. Now, next step is to look at all of this information on a concentration basis versus benchmark values. And so this is a graph that is representing average data points from all of the samples that we have ever received for total aluminum. And you can see that it is exceeding, it used to be 0.75 milligrams per liter, routinely exceeding benchmark concentrations. And at a glance, this may seem like an indication that we better continue to be diligent and sample for aluminum. However, as I'm writing this permit and preparing a replacement permit, my proposal is to remove aluminum altogether from the new permit, for the reason being that it is the most abundant element in Earth's crust, and any concentration of total suspended solids, especially if you're up to 150 milligrams per liter, which is a benchmark value in the current permit, is going to be an exceedance automatically of benchmark concentration for aluminum. However, we have no indication that in any stream in Tennessee, aluminum is a pollutant of concern. In other words, our assessment had never shown that aluminum is a problem. So we have done an analysis of soil natural composition in Tennessee and compared with TMSP benchmark concentrations if you're discharging what is otherwise considered an appropriate and allowable amount of 150 milligrams per liter. And it shows up that aluminum, and remember the first slide when I said magnesium, we'll get back to it, there's magnesium also showing as an element that will be exceeded with respect to benchmark concentration. So we're going to get rid of aluminum and magnesium in the upcoming permit. So ammonia is an example where, and I probably maybe should have asked you a question. Based on your experience, what type of runoff would be having ammonia the most? And if you have been in this business, you would say, landfills and maybe some food manufacturing. And guess what? It is landfills that has the most 10% exceedances of ammonia. So ammonia will be one of those that we will adopt updated 1999 acute criteria for ammonia, 2019 criteria for ammonia, and we will incorporate it as 2.14 milligrams per liter in the new permit. BOD, on the other hand, is a relatively expensive, straightforward, but incredibly slow test. And look at the historical concentrations. They're way below 30 milligrams per liter. I don't see a benefit anybody trying to run BOD. We get data only 5 days or a week later. It is meaningless. And so I am proposing to replace BOD with total organic carbon, keeping the 30 milligrams per liter as a threshold, as a benchmark concentration. And so that's all that I wanted to talk, to leave a little bit of room for any questions that you might have about reporting and sampling in the new permit.
Thanks for that information. Let's see. I don't see any questions currently in the chat, but if you have any questions for Voyan, please send those into the chat. Like I mentioned before, make sure that the word host or all is in that drop-down box for the chat, and then as those come in, I will make sure to get those asked, and we can get those answered. But very much appreciate the information and all the work that you do. We are going to move right along, and like I mentioned, if you have those questions or comments, send those in the chat box. So
Final word, don't send any notices of intent yet. Wait for the new permit to become issued. You will have 90 days after that time, and I'm doing my best to keep this permit as simple and as short as humanly possible. Thank you.
We appreciate your work. And next, we are going to move right along to our Hazardous Waste Program Manager for TDEC's Division of Solid Waste Management. This is Ms. Beverly Philpott. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Caleb. I'm going to go ahead and turn my camera on so you can at least put a face with a name. As Caleb said, I'm Beverly Philpott. I'm the Hazardous Waste Program Manager for Tennessee. And I wanted to talk to you today just a little bit about annual reporting. I'm going to go ahead and turn my camera off. Sometimes it does make things freeze, or it makes, the sound a little strange. So I will go ahead and turn that off. And then Caleb, if you want to go to the next slide. So who has to file an annual report? large quantity generators, small quantity generators must file a report, and small quantity generators and very small quantity generators that have had an episodic event must also file a report. The relief for episodic events for the small and the very small generator category allows those facilities to maintain their ongoing generation category without additional programs being added due to the episodic event. There are some requirements for that episodic event and the management of that, but it would not change your generator category, for that year, for that reporting year, okay? And then facilities that generate and or treat hazardous wastewaters must also file an annual report. Fees are due based on the amount of waste generated, and there's a fee form that's used to calculate those fees. TSDF, which stands for Treatment, Storage, and Disposal Facilities, they have to file an annual report as well. And then facilities that are in the Division of Remediation Program, they must also file reports. The TSDF fees are due at the time the report is filed, and the DOR fees are invoiced after you submit your report, and DOR has an opportunity to review that report. Then they will invoice you for the amount of the fees. Next slide. Okay. The reporting deadline is March the 1st, 2025. That means that the report must be postmarked by March the 1st, 2025. If it's postmarked later than that, then that does subject you to a late report, and there may be penalties added to that. Again, Division of Remediation, send in the report, and then they will invoice you. But for the Division of Solid Waste, which is your hazardous waste annual reports and your permitted facilities annual reports, those fees are due with the report. Next slide. We have a hazardous waste reduction plan that is required in the rules, and it is considered to be a business confidential information, and that should not be submitted with the annual report. The annual report for each waste stream is going to ask you for a numeric value for a waste reduction. And so you would include that number on the report, but you would not include your actual hazardous waste reduction plan. That part is considered business confidential. So sometimes we get facilities that have been operating for a while, and they have taken all of the opportunities to, minimize their waste reduction based on their activities. And so it's not always possible to have a numeric value to put in there. And if you don't have a numeric value to put in there, then you would just need to explain that by saying, something to the effect of, we've been in business for several years, every opportunity has been taken, and we don't have an opportunity to reduce waste any further. And so that sentence or that explanation would take care of that. Okay. Just as a reminder, everything that is submitted on an annual report is subject to open records request. So again, just, don't put anything confidential in there. But annual reports are a report that is required to be submitted if someone requests that. Next slide. So when you receive your generator packet, these are all the forms you're going to get. Some of you may need all of the forms, and some of you may not. Use what you need out of there, and what you don't need, don't use that. The remediation fee form down there, that is strictly a Division of Remediation form. So if you're doing cleanup that has happened for a release of hazardous waste, that doesn't mean that form. It would go on your other forms. Next slide. Okay. For treatment, storage, and disposal facilities, you're going to get a reporting packet. You'll also get the generator portion, but you will receive the additional forms that are listed here for you to complete. So send that in. Next slide. If you have questions on your annual report, you can direct the ones for the Division of Remediation to them at the phone number 615-532-0900, or there is a video that is out there on the Tennessee's website, and you can Google it, or I can post this link in the chat if someone would like to have it from there. You can access it. And then hazardous waste generators and TSDF, you can contact the hazardous waste activity audit section at that phone number. And there's also a video on the web. And again, I can post this link in the chat that you can access later. And if you have specific questions on a permitted facility, then you would probably just want to contact your permit writer for your permit. Talk about some recent federal rules. The e-manifest third rule was published July the 26th, 2024, and it contains 2 compliance dates. The first one is for the requirement for small and large quantity generators to register online for RCRA info, and this allows the entities to correct manifest data. That deadline was January the 22nd of this year. And then the second compliance date will be December the 1st of 2025. And at that time, that's going to require everyone that uses e-manifest, small and large quantity generators, that they have to submit their exception reports and discrepancy reports, unmanifested waste reports through the e-manifest system. And if you are an exporter of hazardous waste, then you'll be required to submit export manifest to e-manifest and pay the user fee for that. There is also a link there where you can get more information on that. Again, I can post that link to the chat as well for you to have later. Next slide. So one of the new things that we're working on for Tennessee this year is RCRA info. So Tennessee has been using paper forms for annual reporting, and we want to move to using the federal RCRA info system. What this means is that the generators will enter their information directly into the RCRA info database rather than submitting a paper form. Hopefully this reduces the burden on the regulated community. I've heard from a lot of facilities that say how burdensome it is to complete the paper forms. So we are very motivated to get this completed so that you can do this online. And so once this is implemented, you'll have to be signed up. You'll have to have someone that enters your information, and then you'll also have to have a certifier on RCRA info. And so, you'll put your information into there, and then once it's complete, then the certifying official will go in there and say, we've completed our report, and then the state will get notified that that report is ready for review and validation. It should also cut down on a lot of the lag time in between submitting your report and knowing if you had errors in it or not. So we are very much looking forward to this. I think it's going to be great to kind of get us moved up into digital reporting, and our goal is to have that ready for the March 1st, 2026, which will be for the reporting year 25. So a year from now, hopefully you will be using that system and enjoying the reduced burden of all the paperwork. Okay, next slide. And with that, I'm open for any questions that you may have.
Thanks, Beverly. I don't see any questions in the chat box yet. Just a reminder to everyone, send those over to us, and I'll make sure that those get asked to our speakers. Here's Beverly's contact information. I know she'd be happy to respond to an email or a phone call if you've got any questions that, you're eating dinner tonight and you're like, man, I wish I would have asked that question. Make sure you've got this contact information down, and I know that she'd be happy to try to help answer any questions you might have about this type of reporting. Also, a quick reminder that the recording of this webinar will be sent out as a follow-up later on in this week, along with some of a PDF of the slides. So if you don't get some of the information down, just know that will be sent around to everybody as a follow-up. So don't have to worry about that too much. But thanks, Beverly, and if any questions come up, I'll make sure to get those asked to you.
All right, thank you.
And last but not least, we are going to be going over the emissions inventory reporting requirements for Title V facilities. We've got our environmental consultant for TDEC Division of Air Pollution Control, Randy Powers. The floor is yours.
Okay, I got my mic working, I trust?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, good afternoon, everybody. I guess I'll do like Beverly. I'll turn my camera on for a moment. You can put a face to my name. Let's see if it's going to work. There it is. Some kind of message there in front of it. Anyways, some of the folks on the meeting here, I recognize their names, so they'll know what I'm talking about. Others, it'll be maybe new. Anyways, I'll turn the camera off now and we'll begin. So we want to talk about the emissions inventory reporting requirements, primarily for Title V facilities. There is a small exception that might include some non-Title V facilities, and we'll cover that when we hit that spot. To begin with, the deadline is the same date every year. Reports due June 1st each year, and these reports, I haven't laid it out in these slides, but emissions inventory is reported 1 year in arrears. So we're in 2025. So this year we will be reporting for year 2024. Next slide. So TDEC Air Pollution Control Division, we have a website with our emission inventory requirements, and there's the web link to our website. And we have a lot of information on the website about everything that's on this slide is on there, and you could find that. You could just Google Tennessee emissions inventory, and it'll take you to that link right there. Typically, it's the very first link given on a Google search. The emissions inventory is required by the EPA through the Air Emissions Reporting Rule, the AERR as we call it, in the 40 CFR Part 51 Subpart A, lays out all the details. They talk about annual reporting of Type A facilities and triennial reporting, that's every 3 years, for Type B facilities. And reports are submitted through the SLICE website. That's an online reporting system that we began working with back in 2018. Prior to that, we did Excel spreadsheet emailed to us, and the online SLICE website works a lot better for us. So there's a link showing where that is. In order to access it, you have to be a registered user, so you have to submit a registration. And the people who use this, you have people who are editors, and they prepare all the information. And then there's a person, typically the responsible official for the facility. They have to be the, quote, submitter of the report. And so that person who actually submits the report after it's been completed by the editors, then they will submit it, and their identity has to be notarized through a signed notarized registration form that they submit to us. And that way we then, with that information, set them up to be the submitter. Nobody else can submit it. Several persons can be editors, but then the submitter is typically a single person. Next slide. So these Type A facilities, potential to emit, that deals with, usually what we look at is on a Title V permit, the allowable emissions limits for the year, an annual emission limit in tons per year. We look at those, and if those limits meet any one of these threshold values that have been laid out by EPA in their AERR, then that facility will be required to submit an emissions inventory report. And so we look at the Title V allowable emissions, and then when we find those facilities who meet those thresholds on their allowable emissions, then we include them in the requirement to submit the report. And we see that these have some fairly high values for annual reports. These are your much the larger of the Title V facilities. And if you go to the next slide now. So this is the Type B facilities who report triennially, and you see the tons per year PTE is much lower. And here's the one exception I talked about. On the triennial years, the actual emissions of lead have to be reported. In any facility, be they Title V, non-Title V, if you have actual emissions of 1/2 ton of lead emitted, then you're required to submit an emissions inventory. We don't currently, to my knowledge, have any non-Title Vs who emit lead at this level. Based on our information we have in the APC database, we look at that, and to my knowledge, we don't have any, but we do keep an eye on it based on those allowable emissions in the permits. So let's go to the next slide then. This is just a little graphic which kind of shows how the SLICE system works. SLICE is an acronym, stands for State and Local Emissions Inventory System. And so on the left in the green box, that would be a facility person at their remote location, getting connected to the website, completing all the information that is necessary for an emissions inventory. And we're not going to go into all the details of that because we'd be here for hours. I don't think we have that level of time. Anyway, so that the data that they enter in then is sent to the agency database, data store. And then from our offices in the upper right corner blue box, we can access the system to see what those reports have in them. And after we've processed them and if we have any issues, we go back to the facility to resolve any issues. But when it's all said and done, we then take those reports and we submit them to the EPA, the lower right-hand corner purple block. And that's how the process works on that. So let's go to the next slide. This is a list of all of our emission inventory persons. Olga Jacobson is our manager. I'm the senior consultant. Caleb Gruber is a junior consultant, and then we have a new hire. He's been with us a little under a year now, Damon Rucker. And so all of us, we work on the emissions inventory. And if ever you have questions, you can email us at apc.inventory, or if need be, sometimes you might want to email us individually, and so you have our individual email addresses. And that's pretty much it. As for SLICE, there is on our website, at the very beginning, we had the emissions inventory website, and there's a section in there all about SLICE. It has some training videos, so YouTube videos set up to where you can link to those. It's a couple of hours worth of video watching as we walk through the various screens that SLICE has for entering information. The first hour is all about that. The second hour is talking about the actual reporting of the emissions themselves. The first part, all the many different slides, deals with a part called the facility inventory, which is where all the hardware, what are these things that are generating emissions? What are the processes that those things are doing, and the release points. It's all the many different pieces of the pie that make up emissions inventory. And then once you have all the facility inventory in place and defined within SLICE, then you can report emissions for those processes. And so that's how that works. And it's, like I say, it's involved enough that we have some training videos that we recorded a few years back, and it's all still valid. It's the same software. Co-worker of mine who is no longer with us narrates one of them, and I narrate one of them. So you can always watch those if you need a refresher or if it's brand new to you about emissions inventory. And if you ever have questions about it, please do reach out. We're more than happy to answer questions. And at that, I'll leave you with it. Thank you.
Thanks, Randy. And so I know that was a lot of information for the audience all at once. And what I wanted, the question that came to me sort of for each of you, and Randy, I guess I can just throw it straight to you since you're still unmuted, but is just with listening to the reporting, the requirements, and the different things that you guys we're talking about, I just was thinking that this question might be helpful to ask each of you. Like, what would you say is the most common issue that you see when it comes to this type of reporting, or like your reporting paperwork? I know, Beverly, you were talking about moving things to less paperwork and more digital is going to be helpful in that regard. But I didn't know if right off the top of your head, with all your experience with these reports, what is like the most common issue that you see people that are doing these reports having with submitting them?
Well, this is Randy. My most frequent experience as far as people having difficulty with the reports is primarily people who are new to it. They've not done it before, so maybe they're a company who's just become subject to the requirement, so it's new for them, and we work with them to help get things set up. And that's also why we recorded the training videos, so that people can go to those training videos and watch as we walk through the process of what has to be done. And then, of course, we do outreach, lots of outreach, send emails all the time with deadline reminders, alerts to say that the new report is ready for completion as of a certain time, which it's right about this time of the year that we're going to set up those reports for people to begin. And once we set them up, we also email all those companies and say, hey, it's time for you to start. And then as we get closer to the deadline, we start sending out emails. You got a month left, you got 3 weeks left, and so on until, unfortunately, I have had people on day 0. It's due today, and you're not done. And we're contacting them by phone saying, what's holding you up? You got to get it done today. So we do a lot of outreach, and so we're constantly trying to help people accommodate the requirements that they have.
Yeah, and I don't know, Morton or Beverly, I don't know if you wanted to tap in and talk about some issues that you might see with your reporting.
Well, this is Voin. I will say that one of Randy's slides had on the left-hand side word Cromer, and that is one of the key points in EPA's expectations of data quality, what really would be the equivalent of the chain of custody for sampling purposes, for analytical sampling purposes, is EPA wants to know with certainty that the person that is submitting information, and if that information is flowing into a federal database, is who they are. And that that identity verification process is sometimes challenging for people that have never done it before, and with people mixing up their personal information with their business information, because without identity proof, there is no way that EPA would accept the information on any of these reporting platforms. And that sometimes is a challenge for us, as we have to walk our customers through it. And there is a little bit maybe of a sense, I don't want to give you my home address, I don't want to give you my private phone number. But without that information, the identity proof cannot be provided, so that the person that we have on the other side of computer screen, telephone, or email is actually who they are.
You're correct about all of that, Voyan, and the solution that we came up with to get our Cromer approval for using our online slice database, we had to define and tell EPA, here's how we're going to identify the persons allowed to submit this report. And so that's where we have our registration form, and they have to, it's an electronic, it's a PDF, fillable PDF, so they can fill it out, but then they have to print it, and the submitter has to have an ink signature that is notarized by, a Tennessee state notary Of course, some of those, typically they are within the state. We have some people with facilities that are national organizations, and they have people in different areas, maybe not in Tennessee, but yet they hold that responsible official position, and they may get notarized from another state. Even so, they have to be notarized so that they prove their identity to that notary, and then the ink signed, notarized, original hard copy has to be mailed to us so that we have that on file, and that way their electronic signature equals an ink signed signature. And that's the method that we use for SLICE that EPA approved us to use.
For hazardous waste and annual reporting, I think maybe the easiest place to make an error is these reports are really a continuation from year to year. So however much waste you end up with on December 31st of 2024, that must match the exact number that you put on the report for the following year, and that's your beginning number for January 1st, 2025. So, you know, it's easy to kind of miss that step, and then all of your waste, you know, has to be accounted for. So there's a mathematical equation there that must, you know, it must equal out. And that's, I guess, one of the easiest places to make, you know, a mistake in there is making sure that your beginning inventory is exactly what your ending inventory was for the year before. With that.
Yeah, thank you all three of you for answering that. I think that sort of helps. It definitely helps me, and I hope it helps the audience. You know, if they're having issues or if they need a starting point, Randy, like you were saying, that sort of gives them that point. And I did want to make a mention that every sort of Beverly, thank you for putting those links into the chat. We'll make sure that those are shared in the follow-up email. And then also, Randy, the videos that you were talking about and the resources that you guys have created, I'll make sure to link your website and those videos in the follow-up as well, to just really package everything that we've been talking about today, and then hopefully have all of those resources in one email or one area. So number one, just thank you guys for taking time to speak to us on this. And then number two, just thank you for all the work that you do for the state of Tennessee and our environment. Wanted to now take a second, if everyone's okay with it, to jump back over to the Mentimeter. I know you guys are probably sick of the Mentimeter, but just our last question for everyone. Pull that phone back out, and since I moved it over to the next question, it should bring you to that next question. But if not, once again, just pull your phone out, scan the QR code right there. But it's essentially the same question as we asked at the beginning of the presentation. As a result of this webinar, I feel more knowledgeable about the following. And so it's the three topics that we talked about. Number one means you disagree, that you don't feel more knowledgeable, and then number five, of course, means that you completely agree and that you feel more knowledgeable about each of these topics. So take a second, if you don't mind, fill that out for us. And then also, if you have any questions for our speakers, now's the time to send those in to us. And but like I mentioned before, I know this is a lot of information, a lot to take in. So the follow-up will have all of this information, this recording, all of those links, and then if there's something that you think of later on down the road, or you know are questioning yourself on some of these reports, you have all the contacts for all of our speakers, but also you can have my contact as well. That is caleb.powell@tn.gov, excuse me, and I can work on making sure that you get your question asked to the right person. So I think everything looks good with here, so I will stop sharing. And yeah, I'm not seeing any questions coming in as of right now, but wanted to thank everybody for taking the time to be a part of our audience and to sit in on, I think, these very important topics. Hope this is a resource for everyone, and like we mentioned before, if you have any questions, please reach out to us. We hope to everybody has a good rest of the week. I think I looked outside, the snow's starting to melt a little bit over here. The roads look a little bit clear. So everyone be safe out there, stay warm, and let us know if we can support you guys in any way. Thanks.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you.